Yeah.
Well, hi and good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Strine. I want to begin by thanking you for the invitation to join you today. It's my pleasure to be here. I actually listened in on your speaker, Elaine Foltz, last week and found her talk on the development of the EU really interesting. Um, it looks like going forward, your series of speakers is equally informative and valuable. Kudos to you for adapting to this time and these circumstances and maintaining your focus on online learning and involvement and building this curriculum online in order to do so. My presentation today is going to be a bit of a departure from monetary policy and governance. We will be painting. I would actually argue, though, that art has great value in challenging times. Um, One of the most significant gifts that we have as human beings is the ability to create, and art is really the embodiment of that potential. So art is a focal point of my life. I would also say that we're all inspired by the um, various art forms that we encounter, whether it's visual arts or film, creative writing, theater, music. The arts really cause us to change and grow and reflect and celebrate our lives in profound ways. Um, so even in these times, and especially at this time, as I said earlier, people have appreciation for art. It's been interesting to see during this pandemic how the business of art has changed. Um, the big art fairs and galleries of all sizes have been forced to close. So on one hand, on a global scale, it's really impacted the business. At the same time, though, we're spending so much of our time at home that there's an increased demand for art that can be appreciated in your homes. Um, so why don't I share some of my work first, um, give you a bit of my background, and then I'll demonstrate some painting for you today. So I'm going to just rest on my homepage for a bit and uh, give you a bit of my background. I'm joining you from New York City, where I live and work. Let me make that a full screen. Are you seeing a full screen or no?
We're good, I think. At least I see it very well.
Um, for those of you familiar with the city, I live in downtown Manhattan in the Frank Gehry building that overlooks City Hall and the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm on the 41st floor, surrounded by glass, and looking uptown and over the East River and into Brooklyn. So I have uh, beautiful natural northern light to paint from, and I have inspiring views every day. Um, I studied fine arts and education with an emphasis on painting in college in Florida. And I've been drawing and painting all my life, but it hasn't always been my full-time work. While I was raising my family, I was a management and marketing and communications professional for businesses and higher ed and nonprofits. And then when my children were grown and my husband and I moved to New York City, I returned to my passion for painting as my full-time work. I began to participate in a few select art fairs, and I did very well right out of the gate. So it's been really gratifying to be able to do what I love and be rewarded for it. Um, I normally do a few art fairs each year, one of which is the Rittenhouse Square Fine Art Show in Philadelphia, where I also serve as a board member on the Rittenhouse Square Fine Arts Association. I also do a fair amount of commissioned work, and I teach art lessons online. So let me show you a few paintings on my site, and I'll explain how I approach my work.
This.
There we go. So this first piece, I'm not seeing the full view, but that's okay. This first piece is from a body of work I call Human Connections. This is a view of a big sister, and she's charged with her little brother. And I'm imagining that he is her daily responsibility. He's holding her hand. He's feeling safe. No matter what comes his way, she's there. And the composition of the piece, their placement and posture, her gaze, which is downward and stable, his innocent but also deep expression and outward gaze, the color palette that I use, these are all elements that I use to help convey my thoughts and expression about their connection. If you now scroll from the point downward to the next piece.
Oh, sorry. Oh, got it.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. This next painting is of a dad with his child on his lap. He's curled toward her. He's devoted to her, and all is right in her world. Again, the setting supports the story. You'll notice that I tend not to use super bright colors. There's a lot of mixing involved, and we'll get into some mixing when I begin to paint. This piece actually has an interesting story. I posted the painting on my social media when I completed it, and from there it was picked up and reposted on a Facebook group called Fathers Matter, where it just took off. It went viral about the time of the tragic helicopter crash that killed Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna. So I think the timing of that played a part on its impact. There were nearly 40,000 shares right away, and thousands of heartfelt comments about the importance of fathers on the lives of their children. So it was really moving to connect with so many in such a positive and emotional way through my artwork. Now, if you scroll back up and click on artwork, yes. Then next image to click on is that subway bride. The topic is called Vitality, yes. So there you go, thank you. This next painting is in a group that I call Vitality. In particular, I'm referencing and depicting strong and energetic and proud women. Sometimes I show them alone, sometimes they're with their partners or their friends, but they're always individuals with vitality, and they're comfortable in their own skin. This bride, if you scroll down a bit, has sneakers on and she's bunching up her gown to get on the subway. And
does everybody see the bride?
You may not be able to see the sneakers. There we go. So she just radiates adventure and confidence, and she welcomes us in on it with humor. Now, if you can navigate back up to artwork. Back up at the top. Well, I'm sorry, that's good enough. The lower left corner, that sepia toned image, there, if you'll click on that, please. This painting is part of a group that I call Tranquility. It's actually the first body of work that I shared when I began showing my paintings at art fairs and galleries. And this body of work is distinctive in that I use a real limited palette. It's kind of sepia tone. And the subjects are all either at the beach or somewhere by the water. For me, the beach is a sanctuary of peace and restoration. As a child, I spent all of my summers in a small town at the beach. My dad was a carpenter and he built our family's cottage. We had no phone, no television. So it was outdoors all day with my brother and sister, just inventing our own entertainment. And it was very quiet at night. It was a completely different existence than the rest of the year. Um, when my mother passed.
Sharon, we already have 2 questions.
Oh,
Are you
good.
working
Good.
from Are you
I,
working from photos, and what material are you using?
Very good. Thank you for the questions. Yeah,
What media are you working in? Do you work from a photo?
these are all oil on canvas. And the answer to that, the next layer of questioning is yes, I work from photos. I also work from real life. I work from my imagination. I can hear a voice, but I'm not hearing the question. Shall I go on?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So actually, I'm the next part of this kind of story is that when my mother passed, I got just a treasure trove of all these old black and white photos. And they were from her own family's lakeside vacations. I didn't know who most of the people were, but I loved the era. I loved the old black and whites. I loved the kind of modest but flattering bathing suits for the women, and so I kind of got started on this whole body of work. And even now, I'll keep an eye out for vintage bathing suits, and if I see something I like, that'll be the beginning of a painting. So the painting that was my backdrop as I introduced myself this morning, that is actually from this body of work, and it's actually a painting of my mother and father based loosely on an old photo. So, the complete answer to that question is I do use photos as reference. I also have a lot of practice of drawing and painting from live models, which is really valuable, so that when I go on to create my own work, I have a good sense of anatomy, and so that's not a challenge. I can be free to create and express. So both photos and live models, and then also my imagination. And so that's kind of those are all the elements of my figurative work. Did I answer the question completely?
I guess.
So yes, and so one more body of work, if we go back up to the heading of artwork, identity. Yes, thank you. There's a lot more to explore on my site, but I'll share just this one more, and then I'll begin to paint for you. This is from a series I call Identity. They're actually some of my commission portraits, but I find that term limiting. So I use identity. I'm really looking to do so much more than just capture a likeness. I want to create a complete presence of that person, so that you can almost imagine what they sound like. For me, it's successful when there's like energy in the canvas and there's a spirit in the room. Unlike the days when a subject would pose for hours and hours for a live portrait painting. I often don't even meet my subject. More often, when someone commissions a painting, I am working from photos. And what I will do is I will ask for lots and lots of photos. I want to see the person or persons with lots of different expressions from lots of angles. And then I'll have a conversation with the person commissioning the piece. and interview them, ask them more about the person or the people that I'm painting, just to get a sense of them, to get to know them better. What are their interests? What do they care about? If they have siblings, where are they in the lineup? It's actually a fun interview, and it's very important for me to learn as much as I can in order to successfully capture them. So with that, if there are no more questions on this, let's end the screen share, and I'll begin to demonstrate how I paint. I'm actually going to replace this.
I recommend a speaker view now. It'll make much more sense in the top right corner.
Are you all able to see?
Yes, we see you and the painting.
Great, okay. So this is a painting of a mother and her recently adopted daughter. With this painting, this mom wants to demonstrate to her daughter that she's for keeps. She now has a forever home. So it's really an important piece, and I'm honored to create it. But let me back up a bit to talk about how I get to this point. As I mentioned, I use oil paints. I paint on canvas. This is a linen canvas. There are lots of materials and surfaces available. I like the texture of linen. I prepare the surface with gesso. Gesso is acrylic paint, white pigment, and chalk. And it's used to seal the surface of the canvas so that the paint isn't just absorbed right into the fabric. Once I've applied the gesso, I begin with a charcoal drawing right onto the canvas. You'll see what remains of the charcoal that you can see here in the subjects. I develop the form, the composition. I get it to a certain point where I'm then ready to paint, and then I fix it with hairspray because charcoal, drawing in charcoal on canvas will just smear right away if it's not protected sufficiently. So then I paint. On this piece, because I wanted to do this demonstration for you today, I did a fair amount of the background already. It's not complete, it's a light application, but I did that so that I can work with the subjects in relation to the background, and the subjects being in the foreground. There will be areas where I need to overlap as I paint, and so the background is done so that I can do that. I begin working with the dark areas first.
Sharon, can I ask you a question that we got here? When you do a portrait, how important is the likeness versus a work of art?
That's a great question. I think they are both equally important. As I said, I want for, if it's successful, you look at the piece and you instantly know that person. You recognize them. You say they're there. If it's a piece that's been done for someone who someone has lost, they're back again. So it needs to I really need to nail the likeness. But as I said, I'm looking for so much more. I'm looking to capture their spirit as well. And there are a number of ways I do that. It is not just a a rendering that matches up. There are techniques that I use that make them human. Things like the composition, things that I do with color. So I bring them alive in that way. So I hope I've answered that question.
In the meantime, I'll ask you another question. How do you create the depth foreground versus subject?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
How do you create the depth foreground versus subject?
How do I create the depth?
Paula, can you unmute yourself and then you ask the question directly?
Sure. So you have a very rich picture of a street scene behind the mother and daughter, and how do you create that depth perception?
Oh, okay. That's actually a very good question. With this piece, I have several different reference photos. I have an image of the mother and daughter in a hug. The background, however, was nothing meaningful. And they have a favorite restaurant that they frequent, and it's become a special place for them. So we wanted to replace the background with that. They also recently got haircuts, so I have some invention to do with that. So it's a combination of a number of reference photos and elements. And to your question of creating depth, there's the placement. They're obviously in the foreground. When I bring that to color, that'll be more evident. I will also go on in developing the background with lighting effects. So there's a light source from this direction. There will be highlights on the people, and there will be shadows cast. What's closer will be sharper. What's furthest away will be less detailed. So this is, it's complete coverage, but it's really a start on the background. There's a good amount of development yet to do. But very, very good question. Otherwise, if I was just laying a pair of people in front of a photo, they'd look like paper dolls. I mean, there needs to be dimension created. So what I'm going to do first is where I've done the charcoal, where we still see charcoal. I'm going to now work on the darks first in paint. I want to establish that in paint. I'll do a little bit of that, and then I want to get into some skin tones, because that's always interesting. Rather than using black, I have a kind of a foundation color that I mix. It's a dark brown. It's called Van Dyke brown, and ultramarine, excuse me, blue, and I mix those together for my base color. And I use that instead of black because I feel like it has more dimension. If I were painting with black and shades of kind of cold gray, that would really be working against me as I try to create human subjects. So what I'm going to do with this is just quickly kind of hit the areas that are darkest. I'm not sure how much you're able to see with this, but it helps to define the forms more clearly. And then when I get into the color rendering, I've got the darkest shadows already defined.
Mariah, could we have a full screen of her work?
As I said, press on gallery view, but I'll do one actually spotlight for everybody. Is this good?
Thank you. That's much better.
Better view?
Yes.
As I said, the two of them recently got mother-daughter haircuts. So my reference photo has the mom with her hair completely pulled back. So this is invention. The daughter, I understand, is actually having some fun with some temporary hair color. So they've asked for some pink streaks. I'll have some fun with that. Well, I could noodle with this part for a good while, but I think what's probably more interesting to do is to demonstrate mixing of skin tones. In order to do that, I'm going to move my palette over to the easel so that you can really see much better. So give me a moment to set that up, and then I'll bring this back up once the colors are mixed. I generally will mix some of my paints before I get started. So this is a good exercise, but I don't always do that. I kind of have a basic palette, and then I build as I go along. So to do skin tones, a good start is to create something called the Zorn palette. It's referencing a Swedish artist from the 1900s. His name was Anders Zorn. And he was known for doing nudes and portraits, a lot of outdoor settings. He used a very limited palette. I think, well, let me go on and demonstrate. The colors to use are yellow ochre, cadmium red, ivory black, and white. That's it. And from that, you can really get a range of skin tones. I think that they work so well because, so here's yellow ochre. I think that they work so well because they're kind of earthy, natural versions of the primary colors. If you think of the primaries, yellow, red, and blue, the yellow is kind of a lemon yellow. The red is stop sign red, and blue is kind of a marine blue. They're very bright. They're very intense colors, and our skin flesh tones are not that bright. So you know, there's an earthy version of a yellow.
Cadmium red. Ivory black.
Now, you heard me say I don't usually paint with black. You know, for this formula, it's necessary, but you know, my own kind of getting started dark color is that brown and blue combination that I referenced. I ordinarily am not working with an upright palette. It's usually just you know, placed on the surface of my taboret. Luckily, oil paints are thick and there'll be minimal dripping. I'm doing this really so that I can demonstrate more easily. And so begin with taking the yellow ochre, creating another color from the combination of yellow ochre and red. I'm using real little bits at a time of the red because red's such a potent pigment. Creates the next color. And again, now a little bit more of the red. Are you able to see the difference in the colors as I'm doing this mixing? It'll become a little more obvious as I make shades of these colors. And by that I mean adding white, adding gray, adding black. So we have yellow ochre, skip over to cadmium red. There's our black, there's our white. And I added a trace of red to the yellow ochre for this. I added a little bit more red to the yellow ochre for that. The next stage is to take each one of these colors and add white. So that becomes a little more obvious. I should mention that it is always best to mix with a palette knife. Can be tempting to do it with a brush, but you'll wear your brushes down really quickly if you do a lot of mixing with your brushes. And brushes are to be cared for. They need to be cleaned every time they're used. I'll even add there's a special soap used for cleaning oil paint from brushes. I'll even take a trace of hair conditioner once I've cleaned my brushes and rub it on the bristles just to preserve them. Okay, so now we have these colors with a shade of them by adding white. The next thing is to mix a light gray. With that, I'll go back to the original colors and mix the light gray into the first color, which was pure yellow ochre. If I were really taking my time with this, I would do several shades of gray, and there would be a very small difference between each color. I'm making this pretty dramatic so that you can actually see it on the palette. Making sense so far? I'll do one more row with a little bit darker gray. And then we can get back to the canvas. I'm often asked,
In the meantime, I'll ask you a question that was raised here, but you'll continue and I'll ask you, how long does it take on average from start to finish to complete the work? And how many hours a day on average you are painting when you're in the middle of a project?
yeah, it depends on the complexity of the piece, how long it takes. The piece that I'm beginning to work on is 24 by 30, I believe, 24 inches by 30 inches. And with 2 subjects, I will probably work on it for a month. There's some drying time involved. Once it dries, I varnish it and then wire it for hanging and such. So the project too takes a couple of months. I've done some paintings that are much, much larger, much more complex. And I've done smaller paintings that I can just have fun and do them in a day. They would not have much of a background. They'd be more kind of sketches and things like that. And I paint nearly every day. Sometimes I'm painting on a piece that is that already belongs to someone, a commission piece. Sometimes I'm just working on my own kind of a new body of work. I like to experiment with different styles, and I always have more than one piece that I'm working on at the same time, which is, I think, a good practice for lots of reasons. As I'm working on one piece, the further along I get, I actually spend more time stepping away and looking at it than I spend actively painting on the surface of it. And I'll do things like stop and take a picture of it with my phone and study that image. There are things that you can do to kind of look at it even beyond that. When you take a picture with your phone, it becomes a generation away. And so you're no longer seeing it first person. You notice things differently about it. You can also take a picture and flop it horizontally, which is a really good check on how right-handed or left-handed your work can be. It's a good double check on the symmetry of the piece. Sometimes I'll even turn a canvas upside down and work at it from that way, just to give it a completely different viewpoint. Some more. Oh, I was beginning to say, a lot of times people will ask, who are the artists that either inspire me or that I emulate? And I think first of figurative painters. I love the work of Egon Schiele, John Singer Sargent, as a contemporary, Malcolm Lipka. But I also have a great appreciation for other art forms. I love sculpture. There's a young woman who was just selected as the next artist to represent the US in the 2022 Venice Biennale, Simone Lee. She's a sculptor, African-American sculptor, and her work is beautiful and impactful. So you learn so much from studying other artists, and sometimes it translates into your own work, and sometimes it's just for the pure appreciation of it. Something else I will often mention is I'm doing this mixing and then creating color. I work on a paper palette. This is just a tablet full of these sheets. And I will save this for the next day by I'll tear this sheet off the pad. I'll put a piece of saran wrap directly over this paper, then fold it in quarters onto itself, put it in a Ziploc bag, and put it in the freezer. It's really nifty way to keep the paint fresh and not to waste. I think I started that because I went back and forth, for example, to the Art Students League of New York to do live drawing and painting from models, and so you need your work to be portable. And I found that easy way to move my paints back and forth without making a mess. So I have a freezer full of paints. Okay, so you can see how that works. As I say, if I were to do a real complete execution of this, I could build further out that way and build further that way by using smaller increments of the color of the pigments. and create a full range. That said, even with this palette, I still tend to stray from it. When I begin to really focus in on the piece and the lighting, the effects I want to create, I will often put, blue into a shadow or more yellow into a highlight. That's where it becomes kind of a creative interpretation. But for a good base foundation palette for skin tones, this you can't go wrong with the Zorn palette. So let me move this back into place over here and bring the canvas back. And also mention the positioning of the elements of my work. Because I'm right-handed, I want my palette and my brushes over here, my paints here. If I were working from a model, I would want my easel here, my palette here, and the palette to be kind of directly underneath the view of a model. So it's important to be situated where it's most convenient for you to work back and forth without having to move your body and your view. There we go. We're back. I mentioned that I serve on the Rittenhouse Square Fine Arts Association board. And I am, if you're familiar with the show, you know that it's a fine art show that's situated around the perimeter of the square twice per year in the spring and in the fall. And this year we were unable to have the outdoor show, so we went virtual for both June and September, and it was actually a great experience. It went well. We are hoping to be back in the park next year. We shall see. With that in mind, I'm curious to know what people's opinions are about online viewing booths and collecting artwork by purchasing online and not seeing it in person. It's very different. It's something that we're all learning from, but it seems to be something that people are willing to do, and it's actually a different way to get to know our patrons. Add a few more to the palette now that I'm back. So I'm going to add a few more paints. This is alizarin crimson, kind of a magenta. A cooler red. This is burnt sienna. have a number of different brands of paint. This is raw sienna. I have a number of different brands of paints. I'm not particularly loyal to any one brand. It is more testing the color because they can vary. The Van Dyke Brown that I referenced as my base foundation color, it's a completely different color from brand to brand. So kind of experiment and find the colors that I like, and they can all be used together. That was Naples Yellow. This one, I no longer remember the name of it, but it's a great flesh tone base made by Old Holland, which is a very expensive paint. One more, I'll do a little cobalt blue, just so I've got that to work with. Any artists or aspiring artists in the group?
I see Mac is raising his hand, but you wrote, Mac, something very funny. He said, I've always been intimidated by the complexity of mixing oils. Your demonstration confirmed my fear.
Ah, good. Well, hopefully this is something that you can maybe watch again and kind of follow along. It's science, and it's full of experimentation. But the good thing about working with oils, it's super forgiving because you can always paint over. In fact, there are times when I will go back and forth in a single painting, take something out, put something back in, change expressions. I do a lot of, as I mentioned, drawing and painting from live models, and those are just studies. So I'll use that canvas again by just priming right over it and painting over it. Very different from a medium like watercolor, where you really can't do that. It's once and done on paper. A beautiful medium, but very different from oils. You might notice me dipping into an additive over here. I use a walnut oil, some linseed stand oil, and a little bit of terpenoid, not turpentine, terpenoid, which is safe stuff. And that helps the flow of the paint. It also slows the drying time a bit. And depending on what proportions of the additives you use, the linseed stand oil can add gloss. More chemistry.
Sharon,
Mm-hmm.
when you're painting, when you're in the middle of a project like this, approximately how many hours a day are you painting for?
How many hours per day was the question?
Yes. Yeah.
I get into a real zone, and there are often days that I will start in the morning, and then all of a sudden it's dark outside, and I think, did I have lunch? So I can paint all day long, or I will break we have a puppy. Everyone has a pandemic puppy, and so that's a nice reminder to get me away from the canvas and take a break and get some fresh air. But I have no problem with painting all day long. I think one of the things about this time that has us all kind of sheltering and being home, we need to find things that are of interest and that make you want to get up in the morning. Painting is that for me. However, I also realize that we need to do other things and stay connected and as you all are doing, continue to learn. I'm actually enrolled in French. I'm taking online French. I'm in level 4, so just at the point where I can sort of understand, but the irregular verbs are just blowing my mind. So sorry for a long answer to your question, but I can paint all day long, and my husband reminds me to try not to do that. So once I'm in the middle of a piece, though, it's really hard for me to stop. As it develops, I become more and more enthused, and if I like what I'm doing, I want to see it through. It is hard to put it aside. Another reason to have more than one piece at a time, because I think it's healthy to move and get another view. What I should speak about maybe is as I'm working on the subjects, I am always mindful of the form that a face isn't just a face. It wraps around a skull. There is a certain basic foundation to the human form, and the head is supported by neck, which is situated in the between the shoulders and at the spine in a certain way. And everything that I build needs to be in balance, in both proportion and symmetry, to gravity. For example, the live drawing that I do comes in very helpful because I have a photo of these two, but I don't have a full figure photo. So what I'm trying to do is putting these two figures together in a believable way. The daughter is smaller than the mom, but their faces are on the same plane, and she needs to be supported by her mom. So there's a point at which her legs need to begin to, may not be able to, yeah, you can see it. Her legs are beginning to kind of wrap towards her mom, so her mom's supporting that weight, and it is believable that the two of them are together in the same plane, if that makes sense.
Sharon, we have to stop soon, but I want to read you some questions and comments.
Oh yeah, sure.
How would you encourage a preteen who enjoys drawing and painting with watercolors and also with experimenting with oil? And people are debating what's easier, oil or watercolor.
Oh, they're very different mediums, and I have experience with both. I actually love watercolors, which may make sense because I work so transparently in oils. When you think of oils, usually you think of Vincent van Gogh and really thick and juicy paint. I tend to work much more in light applications and build from there. So I don't know if I've got a real direct answer for that one. I actually think the answer is kind of none of the above. I would start with drawing. Yeah, but I think watercolors are probably a great first step, because you have mixing to do that is a little simpler. It's water and pigment, and you can more quickly work in watercolors. This makes me want to try some watercolors soon. I think oil paints. I've always used oil paints. Back when I was a child, for some reason, it was what I gravitated towards. And at that time, we were using turpentine, and it was, nasty stuff. And I probably shouldn't have been painting in my bedroom with my door closed. But it is a little more complicated, and it's not as quick. So I think maybe to begin, a good solid foundation in drawing, and to experiment with watercolors would be a great entree. Make sense?
That's great. Yeah, Sharon, we have to finish our time is over. Unfortunately, I feel it was literally a taste, and figure out the way to do it again. And it's great that you haven't noticed, because it shows us how an artist, when they come into their work, are literally meditating, and there's no meaning for time, right? We
Right.
forget time.
I will be
Great.
obviously continuing to work on this piece, and I'm happy. I'll post it. I'm happy to share it with you when it's done, if you like.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask whether we can see this when you're done.
You bet.
So would love to see that.
Patron, if it was okay to share, and she was
Yeah.
delighted. So I'm sure I'll be able to share the finished piece. I want to thank you all for this opportunity. I really get a kick out of doing these online demonstrations. I like to share my art. I like to get the feedback. So thanks again, and sorry to keep you over a little bit, but it's been a lot of fun.
No, it's great. I think we all enjoyed it, and we didn't pay attention to the time, unless I have to,
Sure.
to be the timekeeper. So thank you very, very much. And hopefully we'll see it, finished, and maybe even shown somewhere, but
Thanks.
definitely shown to us.
Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thanks for your questions.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Enjoy the day, and we'll see you tomorrow or next week or another day. Bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you. Excellent
Bye-bye.
program.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.